But can home videos be used to predict mental health problems later in life? Clinical psychologist Elaine Walker has found that certain abnormalities in the motor and emotional behavior of infants and young children, as seen on home movies, can predict the emergence of schizophrenia years later. Schizophrenia usually appears during late adolescence or early adulthood. So when Walker began her research 20 years ago, she looked for adults identified with schizophrenia who had also grown up when home movies first became popular.
Much to our surprise, there were enough people who had begun making home movies during the 50s and 60s that we were able to identify a sample of patients and, in addition, healthy comparison subjects, which is critical for this kind of research.
When researchers evaluate the videos, they don't know if the child developed schizophrenia as an adult or is mentally healthy. But the ratings of motor skills in children who later became schizophrenic are more likely to show
abnormalities in posture and movement, predominantly on the left side of the body. This child is in a situation that would typically elicit grasping with both hands at the water. Instead, what you'll notice is that rather than using both hands to grab at the water, he uses just one hand. The other hand is held tightly fisted. This is a characteristic that we observed repeatedly in the children who later developed schizophrenia.
But why is it mostly the left side that's affected?
We still don't know why that's the case, and it's something that we're interested in finding out more about.
Here's another child who later developed schizophrenia.
When he does try to use his other hand, his left hand, we see that it's uncoordinated, tends to show some abnormalities in movement, some characteristics that are associated in the minds of pediatric neurologists with significant motor delays, and also with some abnormalities in the regions of the brain that control movements.
And when home movies are analyzed for emotional reactions, pre-schizophrenic children show greater distress.
This pre-schizophrenic child shows a facial expression of apprehension and anxiety rather than positive emotion in response to his first birthday. The findings from the study of childhood home movies clearly indicated that abnormalities in the way the brain works, the parts of the brain that control motor development and emotional responses, were present in these children early, probably at birth. So current theories about the etiology of schizophrenia assume that prenatal insults, prenatal complications can influence brain development in a way that makes the child vulnerable to schizophrenia. Similarly, genetic factors, of course, can be linked with abnormalities in brain development that can produce vulnerability.
But it wasn't until the development of brain imaging about a decade ago that researchers could easily and non-invasively compare the brains of adults with schizophrenia to those of healthy control subjects. In comparison with a healthy brain, this scan of someone with schizophrenia shows
smaller volumes of the frontal cortex, as well as a reduction in whole brain volume and a reduction in the volume of the hippocampus, which is illustrated here in red.
The hippocampus is involved in memory for facts and events. But what remained puzzling was why schizophrenia lay dormant till late adolescence, and then what triggered it.
What we discovered is that the secretion of stress hormones increases progressively through adolescence, suggesting to us that changes in hormones, particularly stress hormones, might be linked with the emergence of symptoms in vulnerable children.
So Walker began testing stress hormone levels in teenagers, some of whom were at risk, and others, like this teen, who are healthy controls. The stress hormones are analyzed from saliva samples.
In our studies now, we're focusing on teenagers, on average about 14 years of age, who are showing subtle signs of hallucinations, delusions, the symptom criteria for schizophrenia,
And the stress hormone of greatest interest is cortisol.
What we're finding is that the adolescents who show the most pronounced rise in cortisol secretion through the process of adolescent development are also the ones who are most likely to show a progression of symptoms and to become diagnosed with schizophrenia.
And down the road, a combination of biological measures, high-tech brain imaging, and low-tech home movies may provide some answers to one of the most serious of mental health disorders.